In this video, we're going to prove the class equation in group theory. Now, this looks super intimidating. Don't worry, okay? We're going to break it down in this video. I'm going to explain everything from scratch. The class equation is really fundamental. You can't get deep into group theory without mastering this, but this is actually obvious, as complicated as it looks. And I'm a professional mathematician researching group theory. So I'm going to explain to you why this is obvious, some secrets that you may not find elsewhere. So let's just dive into it. So what the class equation is saying, okay, we're going to get into this statement, okay? First of all, I'm just going to talk about the simple expression of the class equation, okay? So first of all, what is a conjugacy class in a group? Okay, so if we have a group G, okay, here we're dealing with finite groups, but what I'm going to say here is true for any group. We define an equivalence relation on G, okay? So we're going to say that two elements of G, X and Y, we're going to say X is equivalent to Y. If there exists G, okay, so if there exists a G in G such that G inverse XG is equal to Y, okay, so we say X is equivalent to Y if G inverse XG is equal to Y, and G inverse XG is called the conjugate of X by G, okay, so we'll master this over the course of the video. Maybe you've probably already seen this, okay, but I'm just going to explain to you this concept with a view towards the class equation, okay, so this is an equivalence relation on G. Why is it an equivalence relation on G? What that means is the equivalence classes. So if we take an X in G and look at all the things that are conjugate to X, all the G inverse XGs as G varies over the whole group, we will get an equivalence class containing X. And these equivalence classes containing X will split G into a collection of disjoint non-empty sets, okay? So why is this true? Why is this an equivalence relation so that what I said is true? Well, X is equivalent to X because E inverse XE is equal to X, okay? So X is conjugate to X, okay? That's what we're saying. If X is equivalent to Y, then it implies Y is equivalent to X. So let's say like Y is conjugate to X and X is conjugate to Y. So why is this? So if G inverse XG is equal to Y, then if we pre-multiply by G and post-multiply by G inverse, we're going to get X is equal to G inverse, which is going to equal to G inverse YG inverse. Okay, so something inverse times Y times that something, namely the something being G inverse, is equal to X. So therefore, Y is equivalent to X. And finally, if we look at the last step, X is equivalent to Y and Y is equivalent to Z, it implies that X is equivalent to Z. Okay, why is that? Well, that is because if X is equivalent to Y, then G inverse XG is equal to Y. Y is equivalent to Z, that means that H inverse Y, H is equal to Z. And then now if we plug in Y as G inverse XG, we're going to get that H inverse G inverse XG H is equal to Z. And H inverse G inverse is just the inverse of GH. Okay, so therefore the inverse of GH, so GH inverse times X times GH is equal to Z, which means that X is equivalent to Z. Okay, so the conjugacy classes are going to split the group G into disjoint non-empty sets. Okay, that's by the theory of equivalence relations. Okay, this is very important. And now we want to understand what this is meaning for this equation. So let's do that. So I'm just now going to erase this and keep going. All right, so the class equation just says that the number of elements of G is the sum of the sizes of the conjugacy classes. So I'm just going to write it as such. The sum of the sizes of the conjugacy classes, and actually we've proven it. Okay, we've just said the conjugacy classes are the equivalence classes under the equivalence relation we considered. So you just take all the elements conjugate to some X, then all the elements conjugate to something outside that conjugacy class, and you just combine them up and you get the number of elements of G. But what has it got to do with this equation? So this equation is just this equation in disguise. So we're just going to now look at each of the terms separately. The first term we're going to look at is the center of G. Okay, the center of G, and this is actually a very important point, okay, is that what are the elements which are only equivalent to themselves, not equivalent to anything else? This is actually the center of G, okay, and what is the center of G? The center of G is the set of all Z in G such that ZG equals to GZ for all G in G. Okay, now observe that the equation ZG equals GZ, that equation ZG equals to GZ is the same as saying, if you pre-multiply by G inverse on both sides, G inverse ZG is equal to Z. So it is the same as saying that the conjugate of Z by G is Z. Now if Z is in the center, saying Z is in the center is the same as saying that G inverse ZG is equal to Z for all G in G. So that means that Z is its own conjugacy class. Okay, Z is equal to a conjugacy class of Z. So the one element conjugacy classes are precisely the conjugacy classes of elements in the center. Okay, so these are the elements that commute with everything in the group. If your group is abelian, the center is all of G, okay? And the class equation is just doesn't have this term, okay? Everything is its own conjugacy class in an abelian group, okay? But in general, the center is just consisting of the one element conjugacy classes, and they comprise the number of elements in the center. So that is the first term in the class equation, okay? Now we're almost there, okay? Now we want to understand the next term in the class equation, which is these terms. That's going to be very crucial. We're going to get there next. All right, so for the next terms, we need to understand these centralizers, okay? So I'm going to review the centralizer. If you have an element x in G, the centralizer of x, okay, is the set of all G in G such that Gx is equal to xg. Okay, that is what the centralizer of x is. Okay, all the elements that commute with x. Okay, so that is the centralizer. Now, again, another way of writing gx equals xg, saying that gx equals xg is the same as saying if you pre-multiply by g inverse on both sides, the right hand side will become g inverse xg. So we get g inverse xg is equal to x. So it's the same as saying the conjugate of x by g is just equal to x. Okay, that is the centralizer of x. So again, if x is in the center, if and only if the centralizer is everything. Okay, so that's number one. So I could even write that down. X is in the center of G if and only if the centralizer of x is equal to everything in G. Okay, everything commutes with x, which is the same as saying that x is equal to its own conjugacy class. Okay, x is equal to its own conjugacy class. Now, what's interesting with this observation is we're going to get into this now, is that if the centralizer of x was very big, okay, like for example, if it's all of G, that means that, you know, even if it's not all of G, if it's very big, that means many G's conjugate x to be x. That means you'd expect the conjugacy class of x would be relatively small because you wouldn't be able to get many different things by taking G inverse x G's. So the bigger the centralizer, the smaller the conjugacy class of x. Okay, we see that in this case as an extreme, that if the centralizer is everything, the conjugacy class just has one element. On the flip side, if the centralizer is very small, very few G's have G inverse xg is x. You expect there to be many different G inverse xg's because you would have many more choices to go away from x. Your conjugacy class would be bigger if your centralizer is smaller. So that intuitively suggests an inverse relationship between the size of the centralizer and the size of the conjugacy class of x. And actually, we're going to prove this, okay? So we're going to prove this. It's actually the statement that the cardinality of the centralizer of x times the cardinality of the conjugacy class of x, those two multiply to be the number of elements of G. Okay, so actually that is going to be the end of our class equation because this quantity here, and I'm actually going to write it, this quantity here is actually equal to the cardinality of G by the cardinality of the centralizer of xi. And we are saying that basically that cardinality is just the size of the conjugacy class of xi. Okay, that's what that claim is saying. So the class equation is, of course, the sum of the sizes of the conjugacy classes in G is just the number of elements in G. These are the one element conjugacy classes. These are the bigger conjugacy classes, but we're basically saying these are the sizes of all the distinct conjugacy classes in G. Okay, so we just need to show why this equation is satisfied. Okay, that's what we're going to do next. And just a quick comment, okay, this is going to get into the world of cosets. Okay, so even if you're not familiar with cosets of subgroups, you're going to get a nice sort of explanation of them here. And a quick comment is that the centralizer of x is a subgroup of G. Okay, this is very important. So the conjugacy classes are connected to the group structure in some fundamental way. Why is it a subgroup? Well, of course, E is in the centralizer because simply because Ex is equal to Xe. That's just those two are both equal to x. So E is in the centralizer of x. And then of course you can say products of things in the centralizer again in the centralizer. So for example, you could say that if A and B are in the centralizer of x, then we're going to say that A times B is in the centralizer of x. So I'm showing this is a subgroup and then I'll prove that last step, okay, that the size of the centralizer times the size of the conjugacy class is the size of G. But why is the product of two things in the centralizer again in the centralizer? So again, it helps to see this in terms of conjugation. So saying that AB in the centralizer is A inverse XA, A is equal to x, and then B inverse XB is equal to x. So therefore, B inverse A inverse XA, B is equal to x, just subbing in x as A inverse XA, and therefore B inverse A inverse is AB inverse XAB is going to equal to x. Okay, so therefore AB is also going to be in the centralizer. Something in the centralizer conjugates x to give x. So AB is going to be in the centralizer of x. And I just want you to do as an exercise, drop a comment down below, why the inverse of something in the centralizer is again in the centralizer. Okay, so that's going to be a nice little trick. Try to show that. That shows the centralizer is a subgroup. And now we want to understand why the size of the centralizer of x times the size of the conjugacy class of x is all of the size of g. All right, so don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying the content as always, and hit the hype button, using the hype feature. There's a hype feature for new channels. It really helps promote the content if the video has been released in the last 7 days. And check out my group theory course. There's a whole course of videos on group theory. I'm a professional group theorist, and there's tons of videos on my channel homepage. If you go to courses, click on group theory, there are many videos. You're gonna love them. Niche videos you can't find elsewhere. So now let's actually understand why this class equation, the last step of the class equation. So we're going to show the size of the conjugacy class of x times the size of the centralizer of x is the size of g. So again, so basically what we want to do is we want to define a map, okay? So the map is going to be from g to the conjugacy class of x, okay? So we're going to fix x in g, map g to the conjugacy class of x, and the map's going to be as follows, okay? The map is going to map an element of g to g inverse xg. Fairly straightforward, right? Everything in the image of this map is a conjugate of x. So it's in the conjugacy class of x. And of course, as we sweep through all the g's in g, we're going to sweep through all the conjugates of x, all the g inverse xg's. So this is a onto map. We're going to use this map to count, okay? We're going to use this map to count because what we're going to do is we're going to understand when things in g are mapped to the same thing in the conjugacy class of x. Okay, so first observation I'm going to show you. What are the things that just map to x? Okay, so what are all the things that just map to x? So saying that g inverse xg, so I'm going to write this map as fx of g. Okay, so I'm going to call this map fx. Okay, so it's subscript x because it depends on x. So fixing x, we're going to call it fx. Okay, and in fact, just to maybe keep things simple, I'll just write it as f because I'm fixing x. So I'm just going to say f, but fx just makes that clear, the dependence on x. Okay, so this is just a map f. Okay, so saying that g maps to x is the same as saying that f of g is equal to x. Or in other words, g inverse xg is equal to x, which is the same as saying that, gx is xg. Or in other words, going back there, the g is in the centralizer of x. Okay, so g is in Cg of x. Now, that means the centralizer of x are all the elements of g that map to x. Now, what about all the elements of g that map to other elements of the conjugacy class of x? We can maybe get an idea. Okay, so I'm going to actually now do that on this side of the board. I'm going to erase this and I'm going to show it to you. So now we've got the class equation clear. We just need to understand why this is the size of the conjugacy class of x. So a nice diagram I like to draw. This is going to get into the coset picture. So if you don't know cosets, don't worry. Okay, I'll get into that, but I just want to show you the picture. Okay, so g is mapping to the conjugacy class of x, right? Under the map f. Okay, this is the conjugacy class of x under the map f. Now, the elements of the conjugacy class of x are a bunch of things. Okay, there's x, there's lots of other things. Okay, I'm just going to label them by dots. These are all the elements conjugate to x and g. Now, the point is that the centralizer of x is all the things that map to x. If you conjugate x by something in the centralizer, you get back x. Then you get other things that are going to map to other elements of the conjugacy class of x. We want to figure out what the sizes of all these things are, and then we want to add them up. We want to get a relationship between the size of the centralizer of x and the size of the conjugacy class of x. So we're going to see that right now. So what are all the things? When is it possible for two things to get mapped to the same thing under f? Okay, so f is not one-to-one. We've already seen that. When is it possible for f of g to equal to f of h? So, two things, let's say g and h both map to the same thing, same conjugacy, same element of the conjugacy class of x. That means that g inverse xg is h inverse xh. What relationship does that give between g and h? So we can write that down. We can multiply on the left by h and on the right by h inverse. So we get hg inverse xg h inverse equals to x. So therefore we get hg inverse is the inverse of gh inverse. Okay, so gh inverse times x times gh inverse is equal to x. So therefore gh inverse centralizes x. gh inverse times x is x times gh inverse. Okay, so therefore we can write that out. That's very crucial. gh inverse is in the centralizer of x. Okay, now that is very crucial because now I'm going to write that down there. That's saying that GH inverse in the centralizer of X is the same as saying that G is in the centralizer of X times H. Now this is what is called a right coset of the centralizer of X and G. We said the centralizer is a subgroup. This means that all the elements that are of the form something in the centralizer times H, okay, that G is in that right coset. If G and H map to the same thing, G is in the right coset of H. Now, because CG of X is a subgroup, okay, maybe I can even make this very clear. This you can write it as the set of all A times H, where A is in the centralizer of X. Okay, that's what the right coset means. And if we left multiply by CG of X is a subgroup, okay? So CG of X times CG of X is contained in CG of X. CG of X is closed under multiplication. You'll see where I'm going with this. CG of X times G is CG of X times H. Okay, that means they are the same right coset of the centralizer. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is if two things map to the same element of the conjugacy class of X, they are the same right coset of the centralizer. And if you look at, the right coset of the centralizer, you can clearly see that it is the same size as the centralizer. Because this is the set of all AH or A's in the centralizer. They're all different as A ranges over all elements of the centralizer. And so basically, like you're right multiplying by H, there's a natural one-to-one correspondence. So I could even say there's a natural one-to-one correspondence with CG of X. So literally map A to A times H. So therefore, they have the same size as a centralizer. So we're partitioning our group into right cosets of the centralizer of X. Okay, so this is going to be, we can write this out as follows. Let's say that, this is going to equal to CG of X times G2. This is going to equal to CG of X times G3. Okay, these are all the right cosets of the centralizer in G, and they all have the same size as the centralizer. How many of them are there? The number of elements, because they all have the same size as the centralizer and they partition G. And if you want to see a proof of that, if you want to understand this better in another way, you can check out the proof of Lagrange's theorem. Assume you've seen that if you're studying the class equation, but if not, you can get a visual understanding. I really explain it very nicely. You can check it out in that video. I'll refer you at the end. But this means that because there are cardinality G, so I'm going to write it out here. Because there are cardinality G by cardinality of the centralizer of X, different right cosets, and the number of such right cosets is going to exactly equal to the size of the conjugacy class of X, because each one is going to correspond to a single element of the conjugacy class by the map F. That means that this is going to be the size of the conjugacy class of X, and that establishes the class equation we had at the beginning. Another way of writing this is G. This is the number of cosets of the centralizer of X in G, and there you have it. That's the class equation. And basically, when X is in the center, the centralizer is everything, and this is 1. So the center elements basically correspond to single element conjugacy classes. Now you may ask, why is this so powerful? It's not within the scope of this video, otherwise it'll get too long, but I'll do more videos on my channel. Again, check out my group theory course to understand and see applications of this, but I'm going to direct you to 2 videos. The first video is a beautiful application of the centralizer to the following riddle. Suppose you have a group so that there do not exist 3 elements, no 2 of which commute. Wrap your head around that. Prove the group is abelian. It actually uses a centralizer in a stunning way. It's a very, very creative, one of my favorite exercises in group theory, accessible to everyone. Check it out, it's going to pop up on the screen here. And another fun video, as I said, is Lagrange's theorem. You can rehash that, with me. I'll guide you through it. I'll show you visually why it's true to give you a deeper understanding of how the cosets split up the group. You can check out that video here. Have an amazing day. Thank you so much for all your interest and support in the channel.